me paint a picture. You have two leaders, same company, same crisis lands on both of their desks at the same time. Now, the first leader gets the news and immediately goes into high gear. They start firing off messages. They call an emergency meeting. They walk the floor fast, talking fast, asking very fast questions, and generating a sense of urgency that spreads through the team like a current through water. People start moving, but they're moving scared. Now, the second leader gets the same news. They take a breath, they slow down, they call a meeting, the same meeting, but they walk in differently. They speak at a measured pace. They ask a few focused questions, and they say clearly, here's what we know, here's what we don't know yet, and here's what we're doing right now. It's the same crisis. It's two completely different rooms afterward. In the first room, people are very busy and they're anxious. They're executing really fast and they're thinking slowly. This is where errors crop in. They're starting to happen because nobody has enough mental space to even catch the errors. Whereas in the second room, people are focused. They are concerned, yes, they are, but they are functional. They are doing their best thinking because the person at the front gave them permission to be steady. So the question I want you to sit with today is, which of those leaders do you think gets promoted? Not the one who looked the most urgent, the one who created the most clarity. So in this episode, we're talking about calm, not as a personality trait, not as something that you're born with it or you're not born with it. No, calm is a genuine leadership skill. It's a skill that you can understand, you can practice, you can build, you can deploy. It's a skill that at the level that you're moving toward, it may wind up being the most important skill in your entire toolkit. So let's get into it. I want to start with a client, Sandra. Sandra was a hospital administrator. She was smart, she was experienced, deeply, deeply capable, and one afternoon, the hospital's entire digital infrastructure went down. The patient records, the medication tracking, the scheduling, all of it went offline in a hospital where the margin for error is not inconvenience, it's human safety, and it can be human life. The team started to spiral, of course, as you would imagine, almost immediately. The nurses coming to Sandra with the questions. She didn't even have answers yet. And the IT team was sending escalating updates every few minutes to everybody. And people were looking at her the way that people look at the person in charge when everything is uncertain. And that's, of course, constantly with an enormous need. People were looking at her the way that people look at the person in charge when everything is up in the air, when everything is uncertain, which is to say constantly and with enormous need. Sandra told me after the fact that what she felt in that moment was fear, real fear, the kind of fear that just is in your bones. It lives in your chest and it makes your thoughts just pound and move too fast. But here's what she did. She didn't perform calm when she didn't have calm. She didn't pretend she had the answers. She didn't put on a brave face and hope that no one noticed. She physically slowed down. She took one breath. It was a deliberate breath. It was a visible breath. And she slowed her speech to a pace that felt almost, she said, uncomfortably slow. And then she said to the whole team, here's what we know right now. Here's what we're doing in the next hour. And here's what I need from each of you. 3 sentences. She said it so slowly, and she said it with eye contact to them. And as you can imagine, the room changed. People didn't stop being stressed, but they stopped spiraling. Because the nervous system that was at the center of the room, that was Sandra, that nervous system had made a different choice. And every other nervous system in the room took the cue. And Sandra told me, I didn't feel calm, but I chose calm. And somehow that wound up being enough. And that distinction between feeling calm and choosing calm, well, that's our whole episode right here. This is not philosophy. This is not soft stuff. This is neuroscience and organizational research coming together and telling us the same thing. So let's start with biology here. When you experience stress, real stress, very acute stress, your brain activates the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response. The cortisol, the adrenaline, these flood your system, and your heart rate goes up, your breathing gets very shallow. And the part that matters for most leaders is that the prefrontal cortex, right up here, the part of your brain responsible for complex thinking, nuanced judgment, strategic reasoning, emotional regulation, all these very important things, it goes partially offline. Not as a metaphor, literally, it goes partially offline. The neural pathways that support your best thinking get bypassed in favor of faster responses, more instinctive responses. And that is exactly what you want if a predator is chasing you, for example. It's exactly what you don't want, though, when you're trying to lead people through an ambiguous, high-stakes organizational crisis that requires your clearest thinking and your best judgment. And here's the compounding problem. When you go into reactive mode, when the stress response fully takes over, you don't just impair your own thinking, you trigger the same response in the people around you because emotions are contagious, literally. And of course, here's where it gets fascinating and a little uncomfortable. Researchers at Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence spent years studying something they called emotional contagion in organizational settings. The core question, when emotions spread through a group, who drives that spread? Now, the intuitive answer to that question is, well, whoever is feeling that emotion the most intensely, the most emotional person in the room. But that's not what they found. What they found was that the most influential and emotional signal in any group does not come from the most emotional person. It comes from the person with the most status, the leader. Not because leaders feel more deeply, but because of where attention goes anyway. In any group that's facing uncertainty or pressure, people orient toward the person with the most authority. They watch that person. They watch them constantly, and they don't even realize they're doing it. They're running a continuous background assessment. Is this serious? Should I be scared? Does this person have a handle on it? And they're getting their answers not primarily from what you say, but from what your body, your pace, your face, what your energy, what all those are broadcasting to people. So think about what that means. Your emotional state is not just your private experience. In a leadership role, it is organizational data. It's information that your team is receiving and that they're acting on, whether you intend to transmit it or not. If your nervous system says panic, well, their nervous system says panic. If your nervous system says steady, their nervous system says we're okay. You're not just a person in a room. You, when you're a leader, you are a signal. And that signal is always being read. There's another study, and this one comes from research on elite military teams and high-stress training scenarios, and it completely upended what most people assume about leadership under pressure. The researchers went in and they were expecting the data to confirm what movies had told us for decades, that the best leaders under pressure are the fastest, they're the most aggressive, they're the most dominant, they're the ones who take charge the loudest and they push the hardest, they're the ones who charge through the door first. Well, the data said something different. The teams that performed the best consistently across multiple scenarios, they were not the ones with the most aggressive leaders. They were the ones with the calmest leaders. Not passive, not slow, not disengaged, but deliberate. Leaders who regulated the emotional temperature of the team. Leaders who communicated with clarity and not so much with urgency. They created what the researchers described as cognitive space, enough mental room for the team to think, to coordinate, to perform at their best. And here's why this matters. When a leader is reactive, the team's attention splits. Now they're solving two problems simultaneously. They're solving the actual operational problem in front of them, and they're trying to solve the issue of their leader's emotional state. I mean, that is a tax on focus. That is a tax on cognitive bandwidth. That's a tax on the same resources that they need most. Think of it like running a really complex computer program, and every additional application that you open is going to pull resources away from the one that matters. I've been very guilty of this, is opening up too many applications and then wondering why things aren't functioning the way I want them to function. A reactive leader is like opening 40 background applications at the very moment that they need maximum processing power. So the leaders who get the best results, they understood that their first job in this study, their first job was to close those background applications, to reduce the noise, that cognitive noise that their people would be experiencing, to give their teams one clear signal to follow. That is calm as a leadership skill. There's a cost to reactivity that absolutely goes beyond the moment. It goes beyond the meeting. It goes beyond the crisis. It accumulates in how people see you. And every time you react visibly, you react with emotions in front of your team or in front of your peers or your leadership. You make a deposit into a very specific account in their minds. And it's not the account labeled passionate or invested or cares deeply. It's the account that's labeled, needs to be managed by someone else. And of course, there's a career implication for you there. And most professionals do not consider this. Senior roles, they don't just require you to manage complexity. They require you to be a resource for other people who are managing complexity. The higher you go, the more people are bringing their hardest problems to you. And if your energy in those moments adds to the weight of the room, if you amplify the weight rather than absorb the weight, well, people are going to start bringing you their hard problems. They'll bring you the cleaned up problems. They'll bring you the problems that are already solved, and you will lose access to the real work, to the consequential work, the work that builds the trust, the work that builds and creates the advancement for you. Think of the leader like a lightning rod. The lightning rod doesn't prevent the storm. It doesn't pretend that the electricity is not real. It gives it somewhere safe to go. It absorbs the charge and it channels it without burning anything down. That's what emotional regulation in a leader looks like. You're not suppressing it. You're not distancing yourself from it. You're certainly not pretending. You're just channeling it. Now, I want to say something clearly here because I've seen people misunderstand this, and the misunderstanding is its own trap. Calm is not distance. I'm not saying emotional flatness. It's not checking out. It's not the leader who sits above the fray and doesn't seem to care. Well, people can feel that, and they resent that. They experience that as disconnection, not as leadership. The calm that I'm talking about is engaged. It's warm. It's present. It's fully in the room. It's the difference between being affected by something and being captured by it. Think about the best doctor that you've ever had, or the best teacher, or the best coach. Were they cold? Were they indifferent? No, they cared. They cared deeply. You could feel that they really cared. But they didn't panic with you. They didn't amplify your fear. They kept the space steady while they fully felt the weight of what was happening. And that is the combination that you're after. It's care without chaos. It's intensity, but without reactivity. You can feel the pressure. You just don't want to transmit the pressure. So we're going to be real here. And the leaders who do this best, yeah, they are real. They feel everything. They've just learned to be the container for it rather than the conduit for it. So how do you do this? Well, it's a skill, and skills are built through practice. So let's walk through this and what that practice looks like. The most important thing to understand first is that you do not want to start building calm under pressure in high pressure moments. Start small. You got to build it in low pressure moments. You're going to build the muscle in those little moments so it's available to you when the big ones get here. Think about how athletes train. The sprinter doesn't run their first race at the Olympics. They've run that race 1,000 times in practice in conditions that are designed to build the physiological and the psychological capacity for the moments that really count. And by the time they're in the blocks at the Olympic final, they're not building something new. They're accessing something that they've already built. Well, calm under pressure, it's the same. Every small moment where you choose to slow down, that irritating email that you get, or that colleague who keeps pushing back on you in meetings, or that deadline that moves and moves up, well, that's a training rep. You're literally building the neural pathway. You're making it more accessible to you. You're making it your default. Here's a tool that I give to almost every client that I work with, and I call it the 90-second reset. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a 5-step intervention that you can run in about 90 seconds in the moment before you respond. Don't do it after the crisis. We're talking during the crisis. The first step here is to breathe. Just one slow breath, just one. Not because it's mystical, but because it's physiological. A slow exhale is going to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. And that system, that's your body's natural counterbalance to the stress response. You are literally shifting your neurobiology with one breath, one slower exhale. And that is not a small thing. So that's your step one. Your step two is to orient yourself. Look around you. Where are you? What is actually happening? Not the story you're telling yourself about what's happening, but the actual situation in front of you right now. What is actually real right now? And this is what interrupts the catastrophizing loop, which we 9 times out of 10 get pulled into. Our brain just starts spinning and we just start going and going. It snaps you back into the present, which is almost always less catastrophic than the narrative that you're now running in your mind. So you stop that. Step 3, you're going to simplify. You're going to strip out everything that's not essential right now. There are 100 things that you could be thinking about, but in this moment, what's the one thing that matters the most? Not the full complexity, just the one thing. A narrowed focus is a steadier focus. So once you've got that, step 4 is prioritize. Okay, well, what needs to happen next? It's not the whole plan. It's not the solution to everything. What is the next move, the very next move? Leaders who seem calm under pressure are almost always people who've gotten really good at identifying the next step when the full staircase, they love to see the full staircase, but they can't. It's invisible. But they've gotten good at identifying just the next step. And then finally, step 5 is it's time to respond, but now your response is going to be deliberate. Now you speak. Now you engage. And it's not because you've solved everything, but it's because you've created enough space, really, between the stimulus and your own response to act from choice rather than reaction. And that gap, just that little gap, well, that's where leadership lives, that 90-second gap. 90 seconds is just 5 moves here, 5 steps here. And the more you practice this in the small moments, the faster it becomes available to you in the larger moments. And I mean, you get stressed out at a moment during the day, run this, and then run it again, run it the next time. And it starts becoming second nature to you. A great historical example here, it really anchors this in a way that makes it real, is Dwight Eisenhower. When he was the supreme commander of Allied forces in World War II, he was managing one of the most complex high stakes operations in human history. The logistics alone were staggering. And of course, the human cost was enormous. The pressure, there was no pressure like this. People who worked closely with him during that period, they described something very consistent with him. In the most intense moments, Eisenhower became quieter. He became more deliberate, more focused. And it's, of course, not because the stakes were low, because the stakes were so high that he understood that his team couldn't afford his anxiety. He was known to say that his job in a crisis was to be the calmest person in the room, because if he wasn't, no one else would be. And he wasn't suppressing what he felt. Accounts from his private correspondence show he felt enormous weight, but he learned to be the container and not the conduit. And that's the model for us. The ability to stay grounded when other people get reactive, well, that's one of the clearest demonstrations of mature leadership that there is. It sends a strong signal of capability, but more than that, it sends a signal of something that's underneath capability. It's that you have enough margin to hold the space for other people. That you're not so consumed by your own response to the pressure that you can't help other people navigate their own response. And that is what trust is built on. That's certainly what trust is built on at the highest levels. It's not just competence. It's that very felt sense in the people around you that you can hold steady. And when people say they trust a leader, they often mean something very specific. I believe that when things get hard, this person, they're not going to fall apart on me. They're not going to amplify that chaos. They're not going to make it worse. They're going to give me something to hold on to. And calm is that thing. It's that something. So here's your assignment this week. Find one moment, just one moment, in the next 5 days where you would normally react quickly, and practice that 90-second reset. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It's an email that lands wrong. It's a comment in a moment that stings. It's a plan that gets challenged. Maybe it's a deadline that moves at the worst possible time. Just notice your impulse to react, or you just have a negative thought. You have a worry that's just coming to mind and starting to consume you. You're reacting to this initial thought. That's that consuming now that's happening. So it's that familiar surge. It's that pull toward faster, louder, more, and that spinning in your mind. So you're going to pause. You're going to breathe. You're going to orient. You're going to simplify. You're going to prioritize, and then you're going to respond. And that is your 90-second reset. And then I want you to notice what happens, not just in the room, but in how you feel afterward, because there's a very specific kind of authority that comes from having chosen your response rather than being hijacked by your response and then hijacked by what's happening and how you're reacting to it. There's a real wonderful authority that comes from being the steadiest person in the room when everyone else was looking for steady. That feeling, well, that's what leadership feels like from the inside. I'll see you next time.